Luther in Love. Chapter 1. The Pen of the Devil. November 1545. I was grateful for the battering of rain against the draughty leaded windows of the cloister, the sluicing sound of water running off the eaves into the rain barrel, and the spitting and hissing of the pine logs in the fireplace. These sounds, and my occasional humming, helped conceal the scratching of my all-unable pen, or so I hoped. At a lull in the downpour, worried that the irritable strokes of my goose quill might give my scheme away, I hummed more loudly. Ein feste Berg, I hummed. Though my quill, as my tongue, was no match for the exuberant vocabulary of my dear husband, yet did I persist, feeling an urgency about the task I had set myself upon. "Katharina, whatever are you doing?" My husband looked up from his book. His eyes narrowed into fleshy slits, and he tilted his head toward me in that manner of his as if to say, "What subterfuge are you up to this time?" His lips were thrust toward me, more in wary suspicion at the moment than in affection. Fanning myself with the goose quill, the flame of my candle trembling, I looked up innocently from the parchment before me. I gave him my most disarming smile and shrugged carelessly for answer, hoping this would satisfy and halt further inquiry. Though after more than 20 years of marriage to the man, the shrewdest of men, whose eyes could scan the deepest motives of most men and women, I should have known better. "It is just a little family business, that is all." It was truthful enough as far as it went, but tell him the whole? I felt certain I could not tell him what it was I was really doing, laboring desperately at now for 2 months. I felt equally certain that he would not approve if he knew. Startled at a clattering noise, I turned. The leaded window opened itself, again, letting in the frigid November wind, moaning like a spectre. I was relieved at the distraction. The fire in the grate shuddered at the blast of cold air rushing eagerly into the chamber. "I shall get it this time," said Martin, his voice raspy. With a grunt, he attempted to shift his bulky frame in his chair, as if to rise. "Rest yourself, Herr Doctor," I said. "Allow me." The wind outside struck me in the face with tiny pinpricks of sleet as I pulled the window to and reset the latch, a worn and tired old latch, disjointed and decrepit, and with a mind of its own. Hiking my shawl up more tightly around my shoulders, I shivered. Winters were always like this in Wittenberg, vicious cold and unrelenting wet that worked its clammy fingers into the very marrow of the bones, especially so into old bones. "Ah, there you are again, my rib," said Martin, wincing and heaving back onto his chair. With the assistance of his own hands, he lifted his left leg and set it on the stool near the fire. "My rib, I would not trade you for France or Venice." A breathy chuckle followed, but then caught in his throat. I knew it was coming. Why must he laugh at his own jests? Wheezing, his face grew blotchy red and his frame racked with a fit of coughing. Each heaving expulsion of air felt like a blow to my stomach. I gnawed on the inside of my left cheek, a nasty habit of mine. "Stop, Herr Doctor, you must stop coughing now." Saying the words as I used to chide Magdalena for not drinking her bowl of milk, I tucked the wool blanket around his gouty leg, as if that would help the coughing. Yet I had to do something. Coughing like this had become more frequent of late, and though I tried to pretend it was not there, sometimes there was blood in the spittle hacked up with those coughs. I did what I could. I had great confidence in herbs and poultices of my own invention, and my beer, brewed especially for the inflamed proclivities of his bowels. But for all my efforts, blood in the spittle boded ill. I tried my best not to think of what it might mean. Then, to my great relief, he grew calm, the fit passing sooner than some. "There," I told myself, "he is better." Pressing a thick hand into the center of his chest, he continued cautiously, "I would not trade my poverty for all the gold of Croesus, if I could not have you, my Keta." "Nonsense," I murmured, but without conviction. There was no ignoring the warm flush of pleasure his words gave to me. Once when I had fallen ill, and he had feared I would not recover, with tears he had chided me. "Oh, Katie, do not die and leave me." I shall always cherish his words to me then, and the tremulous imploring of his tone. Perhaps it is why I recovered. But now the table was turned. I knew it would come, must come. Though irrepressibly robust in character and manners, he had never been so in health and constitution. Now it had grown far worse, the coughing, the pain in his chest, the blood. Twirling my quill pensively, I set it to my parchment and recommenced writing. I knew he was watching me, so I attempted feigning that I was making a list of items to sell at market, counting on my fingers from time to time for good effect. Family business. Or I would appear to be tallying the weeks before spring and Bertha would be delivered of her calf, God willing. I was merely the chronicler of ordinary family business.
My dearest apostate nun, he cleared his throat cautiously, there is more of sense in my words than you know.
He gazed at the fire, brooding, his watery eyes unblinking, the firelight glittering on them.
I am a weary old man, exhausted from many labors. Keta, I have lived 61 years.
9. You have done better than that, Herr Doctor. November is nearly past. You have lived 62 years. The words no sooner left my lips than I wished I had not said them. What difference did a year make?
You think yourself wise, woman, he retorted, because you are mistress of the pig market.
But there was no heat in the words, as once there would have been. He used to chide me when first he took me to wife.
A woman ought to recite the Lord's Prayer before opening her mouth, he would say.
But that was then, when our love was new, untested, halting about as if on the legs of a drunken man. Perhaps he was right. Who, man or woman, would not do well to recite the Lord's Prayer more often? How many harsh words would be thus unsaid and damage thereby never done?
62, 61, it matters not. In those years I feel that I have worked myself to death.
His voice was low and gravelly like wooden shoes on a cinder path.
I have done enough.
Ja, you have worked too hard, I said, not truly meaning it. God knows he had labored night and day, waging warfare against the empire, against princes, dukes, popes, and cardinals. I had come to know, however, that agreeing with him would rarely console him. Agreement made him suspicious. He wanted no superficial alignment from anyone. No, for my husband, Martin Luther, agreement in total was the safest way, the only way. But if he thought someone was calculating, conniving in their nodding acquiescence, it put the fight in him, and he became like a bull. My false words had awakened him to the fallacy of his own. He turned suddenly upon me.
I have done nothing, he said soberly.
I simply taught, preached, and wrote God's word. His eyes strayed back to the pulsing coals on the grate.
9. I did nothing,
he repeated, his voice stronger, more guttural in its resolve, for an instant, like the old Martin, the younger, vigorous, and explosive one.
The word did everything.
Jawohl, it is so, I said, placing my hand on his shoulder.
Indeed, soli Deo gloria,
he said, punctuating each word with a nod of his head. Now drink your beer, Herr Doctor. The night is cold and dark, and we should away to bed.
My beloved Katie, he murmured,
his voice barely audible above the sleets shying against the window panes and the hissing of the fire. Dipping my quill in the inkpot, I pressed on, just a few more sentences tonight. There was one more episode I wanted to complete before retiring to our bed. Others had penned the story of my husband. Nay, he had penned the story himself, but I feared he had left out the human parts of the story, the ones that perhaps only a woman could observe and record. Though I had encountered some of what others had written, I feared that none of them got it all correct, as it truly was. Either they hated him overmuch, there had been many of these, and called him the spawn of Satan or the disciple of the devil, or they had loved him out of all boundaries of sense and reason, a living angel, the latter termed him. I confess, though there were moments when my sympathies firmly aligned with the former, I was more often the latter, loving him in excess, frequently being forced to confess in my prayers that I looked to my dearest husband beyond measure, beyond what he could provide, expecting of him what came only from God above. Albeit I took some comfort in my excesses, for he had confided as much to me one time, with hand-wringing remorse in his tone.
I give more credit to you, my rib, than to Christ, who has done so much more for me.
The recollection warmed me deep within. I had absolved him of his crime, but only after prescribing his penance. No writing for a week, no visiting the sick and elderly, and he was permitted to preach but twice on the Sunday. If truly contrite, therein only could he make satisfaction for his crime.
bellowing like a bull with a cow in heat across the fence. My husband declared it an impossible bargain and attempted to haggle over the terms of his penance. I remained harshly resolute, a posture I had learned from the undisputed master of it, my own husband. My way, or it was eternal perdition for him, so I had assured him. There you are, dear Katie, his words breaking in on my recollections, smiling and blushing at your own cleverness. He had been watching me. Beware the enchantment of the pen, he continued. It may be the very devil himself. Do as I have done. Hurl your inkpot at the fiend. After another pull on his beer, he narrowed his eyes at me. Whatever are you up to, mein Frau?